I've always been fascinated by Vaginal Davis as an icon, as a figure, because she is so much more than a visual artist. She is a writer, she's a filmmaker, she's a performance artist, she's an activist, an organizer, a club icon, a punk rocker, so many different things. And the challenge of making this sort of exhibition was to show it all. So at Moderna Museet, we're definitely showing you the arc of her 40-year-long sort of practice. But it was also important to move beyond sort of the museum. And so that's why we are also working with 5 other institutions in Stockholm to highlight and to show different parts of her practice. So just to give you an example, at Index, which is a Swedish foundation for contemporary art, we're highlighting Vaginal Davis as a writer, and really focusing on sort of her relationship to language in various forms. And at the National Museum, we dive into her sort of practice as a visual artist. And we're showing her work also in relationship, for instance, to 19th century art or sort of 18th century art. At Accelerator, we're showing more of like her recent work with the Cheap Art Collective, which really shows what she has been doing since she moved from Los Angeles, where she was born, to Berlin in 2004, 2005. It's a magnificent product where you get to meet this legend, not just here at Moderna, but all over Stockholm.
Right here, right now. You are an abomination. You are abomination to make a necklace of testicles. I told you I can't really answer questions in the normal way. Sorry. Magnificent product. Definitely. I'm someone from, the extreme underground. So getting more mainstream recognition, it's a bit unusual, to say the least. It's explosive. It's not something that I anticipated. It speaks to people, or it seems to, from what I've been encountering so far. Growing up in Los Angeles, a very divided city, in the 60s and the 70s, I graduated from high school in 1979, which seems like a whole other lifetime ago.
I want to take care of you.
And I started university in 79 at UCLA. There was just so many people and situations that were critical to my development. As a teenager, at one point, I worked at the Municipal Art Gallery at Barnsdale Park, right next to the Holyoke House, the Frank Lloyd Wright House. And of course, one of my mentors was the director of that museum, and that was a woman named Josine Ianco Starles. And she was a Romanian Jewish woman, and she was just a grande dame. And I've always connected with grand dames. And she was just an idol to me. And she was one of the early people to appreciate me. She appreciated my eccentric way of dressing. My persona, or personas, because there's so many. I'm kind of schizophrenic, like the Three Faces of Eve or Sybil. But I never really imagined at that time, working at the Municipal Art Gallery at Barnsdale Park, that I'd one day have like a gigantic retrospectacle at the Moderna Museet, collaborating and working together, and all the wonderful people and personalities involved. Every level, juicy and completely sexy, everybody that works at these institutions, you know?
Read Scientology, the fundamentals of thought.
It was kind of hard this week, dealing with the death of Steve Albini, and then, having to carry on, with all the work on installing all these wonderful events here, because, I was just kind of overwhelmed and overcome. Well, he didn't produce, he recorded, and there was the engineer. He didn't like thinking of himself as a producer, which I love that he didn't think of himself as a producer. But he recorded records with PJ Harvey, Nirvana, countless number of bands, punk and post-punk bands and whatnot. And of course, my art band, Pedro, Muriel, and Esther. And he was so gracious. And he and I are of the same generation. I'm 63. Steve Albini died at 61, just 2 years younger than I was. That kind of graciousness doesn't exist anymore. Where we recorded in his home studio, he was like waiting on us, hand and foot, me and my band members, him and his wife, Heather, sweet, wonderful Heather. I feel so bad for her that, her partner is now gone. It's still being so young and was about to go on tour again.
Next song, homosexual is criminal. A homosexual.
Bibi Hansen, producer, Black Fag.
This song is dedicated to all the queer girls out there.
She was the youngest of the Warhol stars, and she was in several other Andy Warhol films in the mid-'60s. In 1970, moved to Los Angeles. She married David Campbell, a producer who worked with Linda Ronstadt and all those early 70s groups and whatnot. She was in the LA punk scene too, Bibi, as a photographer, and her father is the famous Fluxus artist Al Hansen, and he was living in LA at the time during the punk scene in the 1970s. So 3 generations. Beck, his brother Channing Hansen, who's a wonderful artist based in LA, Bibi, the daughter, and the father Al, who later moved to Germany. Punk and post-punk, that helped people to just create. They didn't have to be pristine and precise performers, singers, musicians. It was about having the gusto, the courage, and the drive to just explode upon a stage, create a stage, no matter where you are, and just do. Like my mentor says, the late, great Rachel Rosenthal, her theory was doing by doing. And all this emerged in the 70s into the 80s with punk and post-punk. And I was fortunate to come out of that. And it's something that has shaped me till today. And whether I make an art object or a painting or a stage performance or a video or a film, that's not really the point of it. The point is the process of doing by doing, creating something from what most people would term nothing, driven by whimsy and how the mood strikes me. And the art isn't just having a product, though it's nice, but the product basically is just me and my persona and the individual that is before you. And that is what really shapes everything I do and taking absurdity and whimsy in stride and letting it just, reign. Bruce and G.B. Jones, who created JD's zine and were crucial in the queercore movement, they were based in Toronto. I was based in Los Angeles. We were all working in the same vein, doing films and videos, zines, music in various art rock and roll bands. We were all working in the same vein, but we didn't know each other. We didn't meet until 1990 at the Homographic Convergence Spew at the Randolph Street Gallery in Chicago. But before we actually met in person, we had been corresponding with each other, writing these long letters, 25-page handwritten letters that had photos, drawings, paintings, ephemera in them. And so we'd all been tackling our own various issues in the cities that we lived in. But by the time that we actually did meet, it was like we had known each other forever. When I started writing online, because I have a web page that someone who was a student, he worked in Silicon Valley, and so I had one of the first artists' websites at www.vaginaldavis.com. As the Germans say, Tunten und Technik. So Larry Bob created my web page and web diary in, I think, 1994. And then he switched it over to this thing called blogging, which I didn't even know anything about that. It wasn't until the New York Times contacted me and said, "Oh, you're one of the original bloggers, and what does that feel like having being an original blogger?" And I said, "What are you talking about? I don't know what a blog is. I didn't even know." That's how much I know about technology. And when it comes to social media, I know even less. Larry Bob does maintain, and some other fans, they do maintain, what's it called, MyFace, and Facebook it's called, right? Isn't it? Yeah. And on that, they have, it's like a Vaginal Davis fan page. Maria Norman, she's taken over and takes care of the Pentagram page, the social media Pentagram. Oh, that's Instagram, not Pentagram. It's not say it's Instagram, not Pentagram. I don't know the first thing about these social media things, not the first thing. But I'm glad that I have all these young people surrounding me who can do all that. I can barely email. I had one of the flip phones, and I didn't even get a flip phone until I moved to Berlin in 2005. I always had a landline, I'm very analog oriented, not digital, analog oriented.
A lot of issues right now that's all messed up.
I knew your tiny whitey's under. Look at all that. Oh my word. Look at that penis.
A lot of us at that time, we felt that we were too punk for the gays. The gays didn't understand us. The gays didn't embrace us. And too gay for the punks. We're too queer for the punks. Because by the time of the hardcore scene in 78, 79, the punk scene had changed drastically and it became more male-dominated, more suburban-dominated, when the origins of punk was very female-dominated, queer-dominated, people of color dominated. But then in 79, it became sort of a boys' club. So that's the emergence of the queercore was an answer to that. Also, the political climate of the day with Margaret Thatcher in England, the hideous Ronald Reagan and his trickle-down theories. But now people think that Ronald Reagan and what later became advanced capitalism, danger capitalism, they think that is bad. But what we have now, it's replaced capitalism.
Watch, this is one of my favorite drills. See my fingers in there? That's the tentacles of bad economy. This is America, right? The American flag? That's where we are.
Now we're living in a system, I don't know what you could call it, some kind of death, financial death mode that we're in that's way worse than advanced capitalism and danger capitalism, way worse than it. I could see where the horrible United States was going. You know, all the institutions were in decline. Everything was falling apart in the United States, even in 2005. And it's only just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. I finally realized I couldn't afford Los Angeles anymore. And my friends in Europe said, well, why don't you move to Berlin? Coming from Los Angeles, being born and raised in Los Angeles, the city of cars, where I never learned how to drive a car, I've never owned a car. I don't even know how to drive! It was perfect for me, Berlin, because I always rode my bike everywhere in Los Angeles to get around. And everyone does that in Berlin. You don't need an SUV in Berlin. Just take public transportation and ride your goddamn bike.